Newsline. Newsfirst, Newsline.
Today, we have allocated time on Newsline to discuss an issue that has affected almost every Sri Lankan across the board. This is a very serious issue, of course, in the medical sector of the country. The several deaths that have been reported at public hospitals and the questionable quality of the medicine that is being imported into Sri Lanka. And to shed light on these matters and much more, we've got with us here today Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa. He is the chairman of the Professionals Forum of Physicians on Medical and Civil Rights. A very good evening, doctor, and welcome to the show. Doctor, so first things first, is this an unprecedented thing in Sri Lanka? Is this an unprecedented situation in Sri Lanka? Or have similar incidents of this nature, meaning several deaths, a considerable number of deaths being reported at public hospitals due to substandard medicine, and also substandard medicine being imported into Sri Lanka on the record books? Is this an unprecedented situation in the country? Is this the first time, or has this happened before as well?
No, this is not an unprecedented event. The very clearly, as a medical and civil rights professional union, as a trade union, just that's a 2022, the February, March, we identified this the drug shortage issue, and also the shortage might lead to bring back the low quality drugs to the emergency purchasing. So that time we highlighted these issues. At that time, the minister who involved for the drug supply is Professor Channa Jayasumana. So we wrote very clearly about this upcoming event, and we said that we had to get ready and face this event. But unfortunately, until he left the ministry portfolio, he did not attain much. And as you remember, the director Peradeniya Teaching Hospital issued a letter mentioning that he's going to stop some surgeries due to lack of the anesthetic drugs.
Yes.
In that time, the Indian High Commissioner in all it and send anesthetic drugs to Sri Lanka. So that is the first time this highlighted and came to the media and the general public that there's a severe issue is upcoming in the drug supply chain. And then again, repeatedly the ministers and the authorities refuse. There's no any drug supply chain problems, and they want to maintain there's nothing to worry. But then some incidents happened throughout the last June, July, like that way. But that time also we mentioned that as a health sector is the paramount important for the maintaining the human right of the people, and but unfortunately they did not care it. But fortunately, after when the present minister came to the power, we had opportunity to meet him and show the medical supply systems, the on-time data system through our websites and to the laptops, and he recognized first time that there are 0.00 around 200 to 300 drugs on that time, that just September, October last year. So that's the first time he instruct all the officers to look into this matter. But at the same time, he said, because of the drug shortage, that does not mean no one can bring the low quality drugs to the country. So that's a worldwide accepted phenomena. The shortage of drugs does not allow anybody to bring back the low quality drugs and giving to the public, because the low quality drug is more dangerous than not having the drug in the society. So that is how they identify, and now it's happening. So previously also, as you asked, the previous ministers or the previous eras also, time to time, the low quality drugs has come to Sri Lanka. There's no issue. But at this time, the issue is that we anticipated that this might happen, because rather than going to the normal supply chain and normal procurement process, they, for the last few months period, they mainly targeted to the higher purchase and emergency purchasing as well as the local purchase system. And you could remember that the National Medical Regulatory Council announced that their laboratory is not functioning as effective and efficiently. So they said, we are bring back the drugs to the country and a wave of registration and we are buying the emergency purchasing and no time to cross-check all the laboratory
But
indicators.
Dr. Chamal,
So
let's just try to break this story
yeah,
down in a way that our viewers can really grasp as to what has really happened here.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
to just lay down the facts on the table, it's a
yeah,
known fact that we faced an economic crisis last year.
yeah,
And as much as the government and the doctors might want and like to provide very, very high quality medicine to patients who come to public hospitals or even private hospitals for that matter, to allow these very, very high quality medicine be accessible to the citizens of
yeah,
Sri Lanka, with the economic crisis, I think one reality that we have to come to terms with is the fact that there could be a certain drop in the quality of the medicine. And that does not mean that they are substandard medicine, but maybe not to an extremely high quality as the medicine that were brought before. But there is, of course, once again, a minimum threshold that the medicines, or minimum threshold of quality that the medicines must pass, of course, to be brought down to the country. So that drop in quality up to the minimum threshold where the medicine does not result in the death of the patient who goes and takes the medicine to cure him of some illness, that I believe to a certain degree at least is permissible given the situation, the financial situation of the country. But now you were highlighting the fact that doctors anticipated this drug shortage and informed authorities of this and then said, take precautionary measures. But of course, when we're facing an economic crisis, there's only so many precautions that we can take, because what are we supposed to do? Earn more money? That's the entire problem right there. We do not have dollars. But the point of concern, at least, is today there was an article published on the Daily Mirror. And according to this article, the audit report for the previous years has highlighted that there was a difference of about 400 million rupees between the lowest bidder and the highest bidder for the supply of certain drugs. So instead of this issue being an issue surrounding, oh, look here, we as a country, we're facing an economic crisis, so we don't have money to get the high quality drugs, this has become an issue of, we are a country that's facing an economic crisis. And in the midst of this crisis, there are those who want to make commissions, earn a little bit more, or in this case, quite a lot more, and are engaging in underhand deals. And these are the reasons why people are dying, and not purely because the country is facing an economic crisis and it doesn't have money. Is this the situation? Is this the reality?
yeah. That's 100% correct. As you mentioned, the first of all, describe how the drug supply chain is going on. Usually, 1 year ahead, this forecasting and estimate should be done. So the last year, the 2022, March or April, by that time, they haven't had that future forecasting and what would be the estimated and what would be the shortage of the drugs. And that time they would have act rigorously and to reduce this drug shortage. So that is why we mentioned the health crisis. Actually, not only drugs, currently there's actually health crisis. There are disaster in health sector. So this is mainly the administrative and their management failure. That is our first factor that we identify as the why the low quality or the shortage of drugs thing. And as you mentioned, it's a 500 million difference between the lowest bidder and the highest bidder. And then again, just few days ago, we highlighted about the bring back the lenses. Again, the two difference between the highest bidder and the lowest bidder is the 100 million. And today, I did another press and revealed that they are going to discard 600 million rupees cardiac bypass stent because of the expire date has received recently. So then we can't accept this just because of the economic crisis. These are the very, very few examples. And that led
But
to
Dr.
the
Chamal Sanjeewa, now
health.
you as the chairman of the Professional Forum of Physicians on Medical and Civil Rights, now when people look at these issues, they don't really understand the nitty-gritties, who is involved in this, who really brings this down, because what people see is this massive institution called the Ministry of Health. Then there is the National Medicines Regulatory Authority. There are many of these big institutions, and the heads of these institutions, officials at these institutions, they come and go, And according to what we are seeing, at least on the reports that are being published on this situation, it is quite evident that there are certain individuals within these institutions, maybe even at the highest echelons of these institutions, who are involved in corruption and fraud, which results in the death of these very innocent civilians who are going to hospitals to get their medicine. Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa, you as a doctor, of course, would be involved in these processes, would have better understanding. So why not name and shame these people? Because judging by the history of how Sri Lanka has functioned, at least in enforcing the law enforcement authorities enforcing the law, especially on these kind of matters, we have seen that they've gotten political safety, political protection, and as a result of that, they are not being prosecuted in a court of law. I mean, even charges are not being filed. So that is a far-fetched kind of fantasy, if you will, for Sri Lankans to expect that these people who have done wrong by the people go before a court of law and pay for their crimes. So why not name them so that people in Sri Lanka would know who these culprits are? But of course, with facts and figures and evidence.
Very clearly, as you mentioned, very clearly we highlighted these issues of Professor Channa Jayasumana, then after the present health minister Kelly Ramukella. But unfortunately, as you mentioned.
So, Dr. Chamal, are you saying that you all went to the minister, the previous Minister of Health, Channa Jayasumana, and the current Minister of Health, Keheli Rambukwella, and told them, look here, this is the evidence. This is what these officials are doing. They are lining their pockets. They are bringing in substandard medicine and killing people in the country. What was the response that you got? Have you followed up on what action the minister
took? Actually, we want to get the date to meet Professor Channa Jayasumana with highlighting all the things. But unfortunately, until he left the portfolio, he never gave a date to meet him. So that's the.
So y'all couldn't make these revelations to the previous minister.
Second minister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's come to the current minister.
He gave opportunity to meet him, and that is the time. First time he acknowledged that there's a drug shortage in the country because we displayed all the laptops and computers to him and entered to the medical supply division. There was an information system that time, and so he acknowledged that there's a drug shortage, and he clearly mentioned my officials has given me the false information. And we could remember that the present president also, when he's a prime minister, appoint a health subcommittee under Ruwan Wichewardene and the Saman Ekanayaka team. So they said that the health ministers are not divulging the real-time data to get the decision. So that time we gave all the proposals and everything to the Mr. Saman Ekanayaka. Unfortunately, he said, Doctor, we acknowledge and we appreciate all these things, and we know all these are correct. These data are correct. But unfortunately, I also can't work or change this higher level or the other ministry officials. So that is the response came from the Mr. Saman Ekanayaka last September, October, when we had the meeting.
That was the secretary to the president.
Yeah, that time he's a secretary to prime minister, and after 1 month time here. So we had a real issue. So there's no one to say these issues because the Prime Minister's secretary mentioned that he can't change these corrupted officials in the ministry or the NMRA or the MSD or the SPC. So then where can we go? There's no way to go. And then after that, we divulge all the details to the public as well as to the bribery commission, CID with all the officials' name. And the COP has also very clearly displayed the officials who signed this procurement board, from the secretary, director generals, and the additional secretary procurement level, and other board members, the COP meetings and auditor general's meeting. They very clearly mention that the officials who signed this document. So we display those to the public, and I request Secretary of Health to have an inquiry about the auditors general reports and about these officials. But nothing happened up to now. And very recently, as I mentioned about the optic lens issue, I divulged it. They are going to buy around 100,000 optic lens with the 1,000 rupees margin, but for the 100,000, the margin is around 100 million. So there's the funny thing is that the secretary of the ministry, Mr. Janakasri Chandragupta, has written with his own handwriting with that the hire purchase the company who's going to give this the optic lens to the ministry with the 10,000 rupees difference. He minuted, the Secretary of Health minuted on that company's letter and advised to the Department Procurement Committee. Even there's no samples given, no bid bond signed, but give priority for this company as he's a past supplier. So then what happened is 9,000 rupees company left and it has offered the 10,000 rupees. So the difference is 100 million. And today I divulged that the cardiac stent, they are going to destroy 3,000 cardiac stent that cost 600 million because the one cardiac stent is around 2 lakhs. So the funny answer given from the minister and the secretaries recently with there's a press conference with the Grand Orient Hotel. The secretaries has told that when the consultant changing, they are not ready to use this stent. So we have to discard them. But who is responsible to order this 3,000 or more cardiac stent without considering the annual estimate of that hospital? Because when you are preparing estimate, there is I mentioned the number of cardiac surgeries, number of stents, everything in the database. So they have to order those cardiac stents according to the annual supply and demand. But rather than if they order 3,500 cardiac stent, but that's even used 600 or like thing. But now expire date has come. So this 600 million is completely vanished. And the
Dr. Chamal, now, if you look at the allegations against doctors, at least in the past, just let's go a few years back. We saw there was an allegation against Dr. Safi that was widely spoken of on the media. There was very big publicity given to it. Everybody had a hue and cry about how he muted certain mothers, how he performed that surgery. We saw lecturers even coming up on YouTube and specifically showing there seems to be a massive amount of knowledge on that matter. However, at the end of the day, when matters were investigated, it all turned out to be a ruse. It was just a lie, a ploy to manipulate the people. And it was given so much of attention on the media, by officials, by the police, by other law enforcement agencies. But these matters, these real matters where real people are dying, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, and even children. We saw a 3-year-old child dying the other day at the Late Ridgeway Hospital. All of these incidents are just being swept under the carpet based on what you have been telling us and on the reports that we've been receiving from the media and other sources here in Sri Lanka. We'll cross over to a short commercial break. And on the other side, we will discuss a little bit more with Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa about what can be done at this point of time in this country to ensure that no more patients die of substandard drugs that have been imported into the country. Stay tuned. You're watching News.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Sri Lanka Air Force training aircraft crashes in China Bay, killing 2 airmen during air test. Cabinet decides to release water to rice fields from Samanalavaga. 40% of cultivation already destroyed. Over 28,000 families affected by dry spell. Labour Struggle Centre goes to court to secure pension funds. Civil and political groups condemn President's remarks on debt restructuring.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Hello there and welcome back. You're watching Newsline. We're in discussion with Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa. If you're just joining us now, he is the chairman of the Professional Forum of Physicians on Medical and Civil Rights. And well, the topic, I'm pretty sure you can guess. Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa, as we were discussing before the break, it almost seems helpless for the people in Sri Lanka, because when something actually happens, when there is a prima facie case of medical negligence, nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to care, since there is no election around, since there is no political mileage that can be gained through this. Absolutely no one seems to care. No one, especially in positions of power, from the government to the Ministry of Health, to various other law enforcement agencies, no one seems to care. But as we kind of try to draw a parallel before, when there is some political mileage that can be gained, when there is some racial agenda that can be accomplished, like in the case of Dr. Safi, there are many people to come and cry and shout and speak to the media about perceived false, manipulative allegations against a medical professional. Now, Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa, against a backdrop where the country is in the midst of an economic crisis, and now there are very serious concerns on the part of the people as to if the drugs, the medicine that they are consuming are of substandard quality. Now, just like during an economic crisis, Sri Lankan economists were worried that people will make a run on the banks, and which is one of the reasons why during the domestic debt optimization program, the announcement of the said program, banks were closed down for 5 days. Similarly, when there are these massive allegations, these credible allegations, and certain allegations, even ministry officials, responsible officials have come on screen and said that, look here, these are substandard drugs that were brought into the country. We are suspending the use of that batch. So when there is a situation like this, people are going to start being reluctant to go to national hospitals, to government hospitals, to state-owned hospitals, and consume the medicine that is given to them from there. Now, recently, I also saw health ministry officials, high-ranking officials coming out and saying, don't spread stories like this regarding substandard medicine because the people are getting scared to come to hospitals, and there are those who opt not to go to hospitals and instead seek some other remedies that they can, maybe perform at home. So how would you respond to these statements by senior health ministry officials saying, don't spread stories about these substandard medicine, don't talk too much about these because the people will get scared?
Yeah, so the number one is that as a professional and also we can with the public sector, we have rights to inform what's the current scenario to the public, because this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is not the normal scenario, this is an abnormal scenario. This is a normal scenario, as we discussed, there might be a 1 into 10,000 or 100,000 allergic reactions might happen, deaths might happen, because at that time, we brought the drugs to the country after the relevant registration as well as with the drug test has done. But we know this time that we are bringing back all these drugs to the country without a waiver of registration. We haven't seen the drug manufacturing factories, even no the lab investigation has done. The recent example is now, that the aspirin production in the Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Health, NMRA, found that there's no aspirin chemical content in the aspirin tablet in the some of the batches. So this is, we can't give any excuse for this type of incidents. This is same to the Indian product, to the Indian credit line. They have to bring all the drugs to the Indian companies. That is true. But then they should go for the quality tested one, as well as the Sri Lankan government can have a discussion with India. It's a government to government discussion and identify what are the low price or the quality product in India, and we can bring back to those drugs. So there are enough measures, means and measures to bring. As you mentioned, there was an economic crisis, but now again, we can't accept this economic crisis word, because this year, the Ministry of Health has received more than what they have received previous years. So no one can tell this is due to the economic crisis in this year. So we are getting the Indian funds, WHO, UNICEF, World Bank, Asian Foundation, as well as all other ministries cut down 1% of their expenses and divert to the Ministry of Health. And our total health budget for the drugs around 60 billion. And for the next 3 months, the president promised to give the 3 billion. So our total budget is around 6 billion. But for the next upcoming 3 months to 4 months, the president promised to give the 3 billion for the upcoming. So now we deny this issue is due to the economic crisis. So and again they are going for the higher purchasing and the emergency purchasing. They have very clearly mentioned we have to go for the higher purchasing. So this crisis, one aspect, this crisis is we can see as a tip of the iceberg. For the last 2 years also this was there. That's why we have to pay around 45 billion past bills are there. Hence, bills on hand, around 45 billion bills that the ministry has to pay for the previous suppliers. So that time, they don't supply to the routine channel because they said, please pay our past bills. That is why now we are facing the insulin shortage in these days. So this is completely due to the mismanagement and the administration.
Dr.
Now
Chamal
the
Sanjeewa,
answer-
we're in the final few minutes of the program, and I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball to you as the final question.
Yeah.
Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa, now, the people in Sri Lanka are the main concern of the professionals, of the media, because while we are the media and you are professionals in the health sector, we all together are people in this country, and it is our fellow brothers and sisters who are dying as a result of these substandard medicine. What can the people do in this situation? I know there is very little, but do you have maybe something creative that the people can do to really push these people in power who are either turning a blind eye to these incidents of fraud, corruption, and malpractice, or the people who are engaged in these acts of fraud, corruption, and malpractice?
Yeah, the few weeks ago, actually, I request public to observe any of the parliamentary members has come to your rural hospital and observe it. I asked as a question, have you ever seen there are 225 MPs in the parliament? Have you ever seen any one of them has gone to their district and the regional or the base hospital in their district and seen whether are there any pitfalls or any the drug shortage, nothing. But unfortunately, we haven't seen. From the Minister of Health, we never see he has gone to Colombo Kandy Hospital and have a face-to-face discussion with the public. That is why the secretaries, DGs, ministers, they are holding the press conference in the ministry auditorium with AC, but they don't touch the ground level people. So I request public to make some professional forum or with as a public community groups and meet your MPs, meet to all the local bodies and those who work in the provincial level and push them, pressure them to take this issue to the parliament as well as, because the people have rights to talk about on behalf of their living, because this is a matter with the living and the death. Because we can't give because of this scenario, and there's now this a completely mismanaged system, so we can't guarantee about the majority of the incidents happen in the hospital sector. We don't know at any point there might be something can happen. So the public's awareness and also the public's worry is we have to justify it. So then what do we wait for overcoming that thing, rather than putting the press conference and say there's no low quality drugs, no substandard drugs like thing, and the people will laugh at them. So rather than what they have to do is they have to make a roadmap for the 2024, and that is why I mentioned still they haven't made any roadmap to the 2024. So that 2024 might be worse than this scenario.
So Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa, you're saying that they need to present a proper plan, a proper plan that makes sense to the general public if we are to move forward from this situation. Thank you very much, Dr. Chamal Sanjeewa, Chairman of the Professionals Forum of Physicians on Medical and Civil Rights, for joining us on Newsline tonight and clarifying these very serious issues that Sri Lankans are facing. Of course, this all boils down to who Sri Lankan people elect to govern them. We have elected these people to govern us, and this is how they choose to govern us. So the next time an election comes your way, the choice is yours. Take care.
Right,
God bless.